Hello, today we're going to be talking about the magic of Ayurveda. So what is Ayurveda? This might be a word you've heard before. I feel like it's been coming up more and more recently. Ayurveda is a fully functioning system of medicine born out of consciousness with the intent to maintain and restore balance throughout the entirety of the mind-body system. Ayurveda means pure knowledge of life. And this holistic health system originated in India way back when, and it really focuses on the prevention of disease and maintaining balance throughout the entire body. So unlike Western medicine that focuses on curing a disease, Ayurveda focuses on prevention. One of the biggest things, or I think something that is most commonly heard of in tandem with Ayurveda, are the doshas. There are 3 of them: Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. The doshas can be thought of as a network of intelligences. So these little systems of intelligences that are constantly working together to govern and make all of your body work, every physiological process you can think of. And although they do work together, they have their own functions, they have their own locations in the body, and they have their own qualities associated with them. So they're fairly easily distinguishable. They also have different elements that govern them. So Vata's functions are transportation, movement, and communication. Pitta is metabolism, digestion, and transformation. And Kapha is responsible for structure, cohesion, and lubrication. Vata is going to be governed by air and space, Pitta by fire and water, and Kapha by earth and water. As I mentioned, the doshas each have their own qualities associated with them. It helps to make them a bit more distinguishable. So gunas is the Sanskrit word for qualities. And for Vata, we have dry and rough, cold and cool, light and subtle, moving and irregular, brittle, coarse or hard, clear and non-sticky. And then for Pitta, we're going to have slightly oily, hot and warm, sharp, liquid, moving, flowing. And Kapha will have heavy, cold and cool, unctuous and oily, stable and steady, sticky. The pulse. So these are where those qualities, I'll go back to the previous page, come into play, is in the pulse. Really, when you're reading the pulse, it's a technique that can be used either by yourself for your own pulse, or an Ayurvedic practitioner can read the pulse of another, and through the pulse, these different qualities will come up, and that's kind of where you can distinguish what dosha is where and controlling what and what its state is like. So you'll see the fingers here. Index finger is going to be Vata, reading Vata. Pitta will be reading, or middle finger will be reading Pitta, and the ring finger will read Kapha. So to take the pulse, women, you'll read your pulse on your left wrist with your right fingers. Men will read their pulse on their right wrist with their left fingers. And if you're non-binary or transgender, you get to choose which wrist feels best. Now, if you locate the bony prominence underneath your thumb on your proper wrist, go ahead, go 1 centimeter down and 1/2 centimeter in, and you should start, if you press slightly, you'll feel the radial artery. This is where we're going to take the pulse from. Now, we're not like counting the beats or really too focused on the pulsation. It's more about what qualities arise. So if you do that on yourself, you're going to want your fingers kind of at a 90-degree angle. You really want to be on the fingertips. It's a little bit easier on somebody else. But when you go to take your pulse, make sure that you're calm. Make sure that you feel grounded. Your feet are literally on the floor. Your arm is stretched out as is comfortable. And you really are innocent with it. There's no right or wrong answer. It just is whatever comes up for you. And this pulse reading technique is fantastic for many different reasons. It really gives you a better look at what's happening within the body on a more subtle level. And for me, at least, it brings a sense of calmness. But as you read the pulse, you get kind of these little insights into what's going on, and you'll start to be able to recognize an imbalance, which may be leading to a disease, depending on the severity of that imbalance. Just by reading the pulse, you are helping to maintain and restore your body's health, and you enliven the inner intelligence or the doshas. And with the doshas, they can either be balanced, imbalanced, or depleted. Or balanced, aggravated, imbalanced, or aggravated, and then depleted. And so again, when we feel the pulse, you'll start to feel the qualities. Now, if you feel vata qualities in kapha or pitta qualities in vata, you'll start to know that something's going on. That's not good. The doshas typically stay in their home. The only time they leave their home is if it's to balance something else, but it's usually short-lived. So there's kind of this process of disease starting with accumulation. You see this woman here, she's got a lot of stuff, lots going on. That's what happens with the doshas. They just kind of start to build up. They get really aggravated, or they start to get aggravated, and then things start to build up. They're still in their home, and at this point, it's very easy to kind of bring things back to normal with diet and lifestyle. But then it starts to get real aggravated. I'll move that for a moment so you can see. So yeah, aggravation. Not happy. It's starting to get more and more imbalanced. Again, it's still in its home, but it has the opportunity or the chance to move out of its home. At this point, it's still fairly easy to bring back to balance. It takes a little bit more effort. Once you get to dissemination, where the dosha actually leaves its home, just like this little boy leaving his parents' home, that's when things start to get a little bit more tricky to treat. And this is when the dosha has gotten to a point where it's so out of balance, it's so aggravated that it actually leaves its home and moves into the home of another dosha, kind of taking over. This not only causes imbalance to the dosha that moved, but to the dosha it moved into. So now you got two things happening that you gotta take care of. Now with Agni is our digestive fire and intelligence. Often we can kind of understand what's going on with Agni if we look at Pitta. We have 13 different Agnis. Don't need to worry about many of them at this moment, except for your main digestive fire Agni called Jathar Agni. So Jathar Agni is in balance. Usually the other Agnis are doing pretty good. But there's many levels of digestion in the physiology. As I mentioned, 13. But with the Jathar Agni, there's 4 main stages. There's Sama Agni, which is balanced. Everything's going pretty well. There's Vishama Agni, which is Vata type Agni. Things get a bit irregular, a bit erratic, just a lot of air going on there. So if you think of the qualities of air and how that might show up in your belly, that's Vishama Agni. Tikshna Agni is going to be Pitta type Agni, so it's going to be really fiery, sharp, hot, acute. It's kind of those times where you feel like your food is just moving through you. Eat and then you're hungry again right after, because your digestive system is just running so hot that it's burning through it all. And then there's Manda Agni, which is Kapha type Agni. This happens, a lot of earth going on in this type of Agni, the state of Agni. And it's dull, slow Agni. The fire is really low and it's struggling to move things through. So there's a lot of things that can kind of cause this imbalanced digestion depending on which state of Agni you're in. But some general things like fasting, if you eat during your indigestion, if you're kind of trying to adapt to a new place or time zone situation, if you suppress any natural urges like drinking, eating, going to the bathroom, going to sleep, if you overeat, if you eat any too much heavy, cold, or rough foods, things like that can kind of lead to that imbalance in your body, in your digestion, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, digestion is often the cause of many diseases. Maybe I didn't mention that, but that's a good thing to mention. Digestion in Ayurveda is often the cause of many imbalances, many diseases. So it's very important to keep the in balance. And one way we can do that is through diet. We can think of food, the food we eat, as little packages of intelligence. And these little packages of intelligence affect our doshas and our inner intelligence, which can be thought of as your dosha. So we really can use food to maintain balance or bring things back into balance. Think food is medicine. It's really the case in Ayurveda. And Ayurveda believes that diet is really anything that we take in through our senses. So anything you eat, anything you smell, anything you taste, anything you hear, anything you see, anything that you touch or touches you. So it's really important to keep things, as whole and healthy and good as possible. It's easier said than done, I know. And in Ayurveda, we all believe as Ayurvedic students, that food should be fresh, properly cooked. It should taste good. It should be satisfying. It should be consumed in proper amounts and in the proper environments, both internally and externally. So calm, stable, suitable environment. It's important to keep in mind that Ayurveda is not this. Obviously it's encouraging you to eat well, but you also have to have balance. So, it's not something you should beat yourself up over if you eat something or don't eat something. So it really is all about balance. Most importantly, if you can eat in a quiet and settled environment at pretty regular times throughout the day, try to eat cooked foods majority of the time, if not all the time, depending on what's going on within you. And eat your biggest meal of the day at lunchtime around noon. That's when your Agni, that digestive fire, is strongest. Really try to chew your food well. Try not to drink too much liquid before or after a meal, maybe a little bit during a meal. And just take things at a pace that feels good and try to wait, for a couple minutes after you finish eating so the digestive process can start. And avoid cold beverages. I know that was just a lot of things I went through, but I think if you avoid cold beverages, eat your lunch as your biggest meal, and just try to eat in a settled state, your digestion will thank you. Speaking of digestion, if Jathar Agni is strong, the other Agnis will be strong. Like I said, if it's balanced, the other Agnis typically will be balanced as well. That's important, I think, to talk about adjourn or indigestion, because it's the opposite of good digestion. It's when things don't make you feel so good. And it's often happens if you consume foods that are rough, dry, heavy, if you just don't like them, if they're not clean, like really processed. But indigestion can also happen when you have really intense emotions while eating, when you're distracted while eating, if you eat wholesome foods and unwholesome foods together, so maybe some fresh veggies and processed food of some sort or canned something. If you eat before you've digested your meal, or if you eat too much or too little before a mealtime, or after, I guess. And the thing with adjourn that really blew me away is the symptoms. So often we think of just like gripping pain in the stomach, or at least I do, maybe some heartburn, things like that. But really it can be anything from giddiness to yawning to body aches to being thirsty excessively to fever, vomiting, headaches, just not wanting to eat. Those are all things that can happen with indigestion. And when you have indigestion often, it can lead to ama, which is like impurities, toxic particles that cannot be digested in your system. And typically if you experience Manda Agni, if you remember that from our Agni slide, that's Kapha type Agni. A lot of times if you have Kapha state Agni, ama can occur. of the impurities. So if you want to look or decipher just, through observation of yourself, whether you're having indigestion or proper digestion, some signs of proper digestion to look out for are enthusiasm, proper elimination, feeling light, and then feeling hungry at the normal times. One thing, too, I like to look out for that I learned in this course is that first burp you receive, or first burp you do, I guess, while you're eating. That's kind of a sign to stop. That's your belly saying like, oh, I'm getting full. So after you eat or during, if you burp and it doesn't smell bad or taste bad, your digestion's feeling pretty happy there. And last but not least, the anatomy and physiology of digestion. It's a little different in Ayurveda. So after a person chews and swallows their food, and it becomes liquid, something called a haras is created, and this is this nutritive substance. So this happens after the food comes into the stomach and is churned all up with the stomach acid, and that creates the haras. And the haras is the nutritive fluid that nourishes the 7 dhatus, or the 7 tissues. So you'll see here, let's say a haras comes into the picture here. It's going to nourish the plasma first, then the blood, then the muscle, then the fat, then the bone, the marrow, and the reproductive tissue. And you'll see here, like I mentioned before, kapha, pitta, and vata all have like their specific areas in the body. So kapha is going to be chest up, pitta is going to be between your chest and your belly button, and then vata is going to be belly button below. That's what we're kind of their home. So when I'm talking about them moving out of their homes, that's what I'm talking about. And you'll see Agni is like the center of the belly, that digestive fire. So after all of these tissues have been nourished by the haras, if you have that sama Agni state of digestion, balanced digestion, ojas will be the result. So ojas is this final, most refined product of digestion. It's very essential for our life. It gives us strength, stability, happiness, well-being. So we really need it. In Ayurveda, we believe there's 2 main parts of the digestive system. There's the amashaya, and this is the parts of the digestive system like the stomach and small intestine. So the areas that are a big part of breaking down the food, breaking it down, but still not totally digested. And then you have the pakrashaya, and this is the part of the digestion that helps to take the food, digest it more, and then move it out of the body. So things like the duodenum, the liver, the large intestine, the colon, and then the rectum and anus. Now, during all of this, as it's going through your digestive system, there are 3 stages. It's about a 3-hour process, which is why you should wait to eat about at least 3 hours, if not like 4 to 6 between your meals, because your body still needs time to digest. It's really important to give the body, your digestive system, time to actually process whatever it's eaten. So there's 3 main stages. The kapha stage, which is the first hour of digestion. So that's what happens when your food is chewed. So it mixes with the saliva and then the mucosal lining of the stomach. And this is where the churning takes place. It starts to break down. And that happens in the stomach, of course. And then we have the pitta stage of digestion, which is the second hour. This is where it's transformed from solid to liquid. Remember, pitta is responsible for transformation, and it moves out from the stomach. So this is actually known as metabolism. So it takes place in the last part of the stomach, and then throughout most of the small intestine, where it gets to the vata stage in that 3rd hour of digestion, where vata is present in the colon, and it helps to dry up. Remember, vata is very dry, so it helps to dry up the liquid, and it creates this mass or bolus, which then is transported and moved throughout the system through the 7 dhatus, eventually out as a waste product or into Ojas. Yeah, there's a lot to learn in Ayurveda. Always more to learn. This is just a brief introduction to what Ayurveda is if you've never heard about it. Really, I think what you'll hear most about in pop culture and conversation with people new to Ayurveda is the doshas. People often talk about, like, I'm Vata, I'm Kapha, whatever, which very well may be true, but there's a lot more to it. And I hope that there's a few things today that you've taken away that maybe you can start integrating into your life or just start to be aware of, whether it's with your Agni, whether it's with how the doshas show up, whether it's with your diet. I think there's a lot of good takeaways here, and I hope that you learned something. So thanks for joining me.